why don't we begin with just a couple minutes of mindfulness, just to recenter ourselves and bring our brains into the our learning aspects. So let's just get comfortable. Take your feet down to the ground and spread your toes in your shoes. Relax your shoulders away from your ears. Take a nice full breath in through your nose. And then take a nice exhale right out through your mouth. Deep breath in. Big breath out. And last one, deep inhalation and a deep exhalation. And as you relax into this moment, turning on the brain, that's really what you're doing here, moving away from the busy into relaxation and learning, welcoming yourself. So with all of the heaviness in your body, just imagine letting that stress go right out through the soles of your feet as you tune back into this space with new eyes, new ears, new connections. Gently open up your eyes. And here we are, all 200 of us in this very intimate gathering. Good. So mindfulness is a great tool to center us. And as we start to work into today's agenda, here is what we're going to do. So we're going to look at the relationship between stress and self-care, understand the neurophysiology of stress, the power of its antidote, the relaxation response, defining the elements of self-care, and how do we create self-care habits. We're also going to practice today some ways to quickly re-regulate our nervous systems, and then there'll be some valuable takeaways and resources. We're going to hold all the questions till the end, but I'm going to use that chat box as a way to build this community because you're coming from our book of business at KGA, and it's pretty extensive and expansive, and we do want to get you involved. So let's begin. So just knowing first, it's our relationship with self-care that really matters. So self-care is not about self-indulgence. It's really about self-preservation. And Audre Lorde actually was the creator of that quote, kind of connecting in with some work by Dr. Melanie Beattie, who does work on codependency, knowing that we cannot fill from an empty cup. And that is certainly true in nature, but when we put it in with, our lives, it doesn't really make the same sense. So opening this up, going, okay, self-care is a good thing. And it's just like putting on our own oxygen mask, knowing, as we begin, we really connect in with some really amazing statistics. So did you know that 75% of adults experience moderate to high levels of stress just in the past year? And this is from a study done by the American Psychological Association. From the American Institute of Stress, 80% of workers feel stress on the job, and nearly half said that they need help learning how to manage stress. And also, there's a few other new ones by the American Institute of Stress. Around 1 million Americans miss work every day because of stress. 55% of Americans are stressed during the day. Stress, anxiety, and depression can cost the global economy about $1 trillion in lost productivity. So it is a real problem. And so when we put on our own oxygen mask first, what we're doing is really addressing the importance of us, knowing that we can't hold up anybody else in our lives if we do so. So knowing that if we can't take care of our own physical, emotional, and social needs, we'll have trouble obviously taking care of others, but things will start to slide in our lives, including our health and our well-being. So know that your physical health is intricately connected and tied to your emotional health. And it's almost impossible to have one without the other. And it's easy to understand the benefits of self-care, but how do we actually put all this in place? Again, it's like a bank account. You have your deposits and you have your withdrawals. And one way of thinking about our self-care and practicing self-care is just like maintaining that savings account. Only in this case, the currency is your well-being. So every time you eat a whole food, get enough sleep or exercise or manage stress in a positive way, you're doing something that really increases the black. But know that when you start to sit for long periods of time or sacrifice your sleep or not make time for yourself or eat a lot of processed food, things like that can really be the reds. So keeping ourselves as the black is completely the goal of this, knowing that once in a while we'll absolutely need to do withdrawals for sure, but we need to make sure that we have enough funds in our account, and without them, basically the physical and mental aspects of our health will suffer. Now, this is something that I find completely exciting. I hope you do too. This is known as the human performance curve. So basically, there is a relationship between performance and our stress levels. So according to stress researcher Robert Sapolsky, all vertebrates basically respond to stress by releasing hormones into their bloodstream, such as adrenaline and cortisol. And it helps us really mobilize the energy that we need to do stressful things and to get things done. However, if we do it too long and too often, we move into chronic stress. But what I want to assure you, what this graph equally shows, is that stress is not the enemy by any means. We need stress to function well. So if you look at the far left side of this bell curve, the word lame appears. What that means is that we don't have a purpose, that we're inactive, we're bored. Now that you can think about this, there's a few statistics about retirement and not having something to replace ourselves on the other sides, our identity, that there is an influx of illness on the other side of retirement. So knowing that maybe there's a connection to purposefulness there. But as we start to move into our relationship with stress and doing it well, we move into a state of focus. And that very section, the very middle down that bell curve, is where we function the best. So know that stress, again, can be our friend. But when it becomes out of alignment, we start to move down the trajectory of fatigue, exhaustion, overload, burnout, and breakdown. And all those things are not good. So asking yourself, what is the stress trying to help me accomplish, can be a really good way to start to really think about your own relationship with stress. So we want to stay in the green, but not too green. We want to be right in the middle with the yellow. So know that stress is something that is a cycle, and we must complete it. So every stressful event has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And know that each of us has a different, what's known as a stress threshold. So if I've been through a lot of stressful events in my past, my stress threshold is different from your stress threshold. It takes me a shorter amount of time to move into a stress response. So if we're looking here at these two sides of the equation, the unhealthy stress response is when we really never have time to come down and basically recalibrate our nervous system. So in this particular instance, we're looking at a clinician. They've had a difficult patient. There's been a slow recovery of their own stress response and their own nervous system. Then they have a staff meeting, and they haven't come down for that. And then they're running late and they push over their own stress threshold. And that is where the nervous system becomes so activated, it actually moves into hypermobile situation. And basically the gas is on and the brakes are not. So making sure that we can stay below our stress threshold is the goal here. The beginning, the middle, and the end take about 90 minutes. So taking time for yourself, it's not as important what the stressors are, but working within the confines of your stress threshold. When you start to notice, you start to go off kilter. And it's important to know what is happening under the hood. And I think this one is really interesting. So under the hood, what I mean is inside the brain and your nervous system, your central nervous system and its appendages into your kidneys and your adrenal glands. So again, whether the stressor is real or imagined, the impact on your body is identical. So When we are stressed, and I'm also going to use my hand as a depiction because I think this is a good way to understand it. Your amygdala is this part of your brain that is scanning the room or scanning your environment to really determine, is something going to cause harm to you? It sits right in the middle of the brain. It's responsible for reacting to your environment and keeping you safe. The other part of the brain that we're going to talk about is the prefrontal cortex. This is what you need to really keep strong and activated to do a good job. The job of the prefrontal cortex is to regulate your stress response by making things not as fearful, but it's also important for your executive function, your short-term memory, your sense of creativity, your connection, higher thinking, organization. So real quick and dirty, if you start to lose your keys, your phone, you forget your passwords, you might even notice that happening this time of year. That means you might have become disconnected in your brain and you are working from the amygdala. Now, once a stressor has been identified, the amygdala then sends a signal down through your central nervous system, connecting into the hypothalamus and the pituitary glands that then produce stress chemicals such again as the epinephrine and cortisol. Now, epinephrine is speed, so it keeps you awake, keeps you activated, and you have a great surge of energy, like adrenaline. And the adrenal glands produce all of these chemicals. Now, if they're left on too long, we can move into deficiencies. We can certainly have issues overall in our cardiac system, respiratory system, immune system, etc. We're going to talk about those later on, but many things happen. Now, another part of your nervous system I want to talk about is your vagus nerve, and you might have heard of this before. And basically what that vagus nerve does is it connects, it's your 10th cranial nerve, largest nerve in the body, runs from your brainstem and basically runs parallel with your spine and attaches, it's known as the wandering nerve, every one of your organs. If you are in a stress response, high blood pressure, high heart rate. If you are in a relaxation response, low blood pressure, low heart rate. The end of your vagus nerve sits right below your navel space. So it's a really important part of your body just to be aware of, and we're going to talk about it later. But your vagus nerve is your gateway into the relaxation response. If you walk away with anything, know that. Okay, so all of us process stress differently. My stress pattern is different from your stress pattern. So when I am underneath stress, my signature style of stress, what happens to me is I might develop a tension headache, or I'll have difficulties sleeping. Now, this is where I'm going to ask you for some input. Stress can affect us physically, behaviorally, emotionally. All different things can happen in our bodies. What I'd love to hear from you is what happens. I'm going to monitor the chat box. I'm going to read off some because I do have 279 of you on today. I can't listen to everybody and share, but let's just start to get some good insight here. What happens to you when you are underneath stress? What is your signature? What do you notice? Tough to focus, I do not sleep, migraine, my stomach hurts, I'm short-tempered, I'm irritable, shallow breathing, clenched jaw, eating sugar, yes, physical pain, jumpy, so many things, procrastinating, agitated. You guys, there's so much variety here. Diarrhea, oh my gosh. There's so many things. I shut down, my heart pounds, napping, very reactive to loud noises. Well, thank you for sharing. It's wonderful that you guys are such an interesting group here. So know that, again, we all process our stress differently. I'm just going to shut down that chat so I can get going. Yeah. So know that, some other signs of stress can include rapid breathing, sweaty palms, cold, sweaty palms, because all of the blood is moving through our body to really move into the muscles that help us move away from our stressor. So we might even notice digestive issues. Someone had mentioned that. So the blood flow of our abdomen is moving into our legs to help us run away from our stressor. Some other things emotionally, we might become depressed. We might have nightmares, crying spells, feeling unable to cope with the environment. Behavioral signs, many were mentioned here. In addition, anger, social isolation. So that means, you just need to kind of pull back. It's too much for you. And then your appetite might change in energy. So there are some ways to, again, find the antidote here. And it has to do with some work that was done by one of my teachers, Dr. Herbert Benson, at the Benson Henry Institute at Massachusetts General Hospital. And what he discovered was known as white coat syndrome. And some of you might know this. You go in for a physical, you're at the beginning of your physical, they take your blood pressure. And they're like, oh, it looks a little high here. And then when they take your blood pressure at the end of your physical, because they need to check because they're worried you have high blood pressure, it is lower. And that is what's known as white coat syndrome. And Dr. Benson was a cardiologist at Harvard Medical, and he discovered this in his own patients. And then from there, he became very interested in understanding, the relaxation response, which is brought on by calming activities. So that's also another piece of knowledge here. Make sure you have your blood pressure checked at the end, because stress, mind and body, deeply connected. And he was one of the founders of understanding this connection. So, a little bit more deeply, we're going to look here at human brain waves. So when we are stressed, we have one set of brain waves going. The gamma waves, it's like you're in an airport. Things are very busy. It's anxiety. You're in hyper awareness. Some slower brain waves also for learning are what we're doing right now, beta brain waves. And then what happens with the relaxation response, the brakes go on and hello, theta waves. Those theta waves are fantastic. And what they do, it's kind of like lucid dreaming. You're relaxed. They also represent stages 1 and 2 of sleep cycles. And that's a whole separate lecture, but sleep is so important. And our brainwaves shift with that too. So relaxation response is the brake to your nervous system. You have 2 branches off of your nervous system, your central nervous system, your autonomic nervous system, the parasympathetic and the sympathetic. First, I'm going to talk about the sympathetic. The sympathetic nervous system correlates with the amygdala, that inside of your brain that is looking around, scanning what is going to hurt me. So basically, when that is activated, we move into the sympathetic nervous system. It works in sympathy to keep you safe. That is your stress response. Then on the other side, the antidote is the parasympathetic nervous system. It is the brakes. It's also known as rest and digest, and it's switched on with the relaxation response. So it's always like working the scale, isn't it? It's always like, how do we find that perfect balance, which is known as homeostasis? And it's absolutely fascinating. There's so many different ways to do it. So let's move on a little bit more. Now, underneath all of this is something really important. The very first way you find some relaxation is creating boundaries. So having time for work and time for outside of work, that is really important. And that's another whole lecture. But know that this is the very beginning, making time for your self-care. Some very simple ways to get there. And I have a history with boundaries because I used to work in public accounting for Deloitte, and I had, I was all work, no play. Well, I noticed that I had ramifications on my physical health and my emotional health. So when I first, learned how to shut the gate on my boundary fence, it really made a big difference in how I felt. So making time for yourself and carving out your boundaries. The very important word for you to know how to say is the word no. And that can be done so gently and so tactfully within what's acceptable in your work environment. So having the words, for example, I have a hard stop, and that could be at a set time. Knowing, again, you can't do everything all at 24 hours. You need a time to kind of go into your cave so that you can get energized and then reappear. Another way to set a boundary is, this is important to me, what you're saying. Can I get back to you? Give it a pause. Can I get back to you? So first, start by setting some boundaries because they really make a difference. We're going to talk a little bit more about boundaries. Now think about a citrus fruit. I love this one because it really does exemplify what a boundary looks like. You know, a very thick, hard skin. And that thick, hard skin allows for protection. It keeps the vulnerable pieces intact and keeps the fruit moisturized, etc. So keeps everything safe. Now, self-care is like a wheel, and this is important to know. Your self-care has layers, just like that orange. And we're looking right now at the Harvard self-care wheel, and you'll see there's many different, it's like a pie, all these little pieces of the pie. And if one of those areas is not filled to capacity, the pie is not full, or the wheel does not spin. So think about that. And we're going to do some work at the end of this as well. But, of all those areas, just taking a quick look, this is a recorded presentation, so you can come back on later. What do I do well with and what don't I do so well with? And just being aware of it and keeping it aside. So you might be the most wonderful person about going to the gym every day, but your personal bank account might be in the red because you're not managing that aspect of your self-care. Just think about that. Now, this also is related to the work done at the Benson Henry Institute. It is known as the self-care stool. So if you think about a stool, it has 4 strong legs. And these are the essentials of your self-care. And if one of those legs, just like the wheel, is not filled or is weakened, the whole stool starts to slide. So I'm going to give you some real quick hints about how do you keep your self-care wheel strong. The first thing that you can do for yourself, the most critical and important thing, is your sleep. Making sure as adults we get 7 to 8 hours of sleep. And it's not the quantity that matters, it's really the quality. So making sure that you set your environment so that you work with light, making light your friend. Making sure if you do need a dark environment, you use shades, especially if you are a shift worker, that is so important. Making sure that noise is kept to a minimum and keep the temperature of your room at about 60 to 65, so much cooler than you'd think. So sleep is critical and important, especially, you move through 4 different stages of sleep, moving from light sleep to deep sleep. Now, deep sleep is where the body and the physical body and the mind really regenerate. And it only represents about 25% of our entire sleep schedule, our sleep cycle. And what kind of vacillates all the way through is our REM sleep. And what REM stands for, yes, rapid eye movement or dreaming, but to remember, consolidation of memories. So really give sleep your deep attention and make it a priority. The next thing, nutrition and hydration. So nutrition, making sure you do your best to stay away from highly processed foods and sugars. I know it's a tough time of year, but you can set this for when this big wave of holidays moves forward. But making sure that you are eating foods that are full, whole in quality. Plant-based diet is great for the planet. Is it right for you? Just consider that. Can you add a little bit more in terms of whole foods? Hydration is interesting. Half of your body weight in fluid ounces. Having a way to, we're going to create habits later in this webinar, but make sure you have something to keep your liquids in. So maybe it's a mug, a favorite mug or container, just have it available for yourself. Exercise 20 minutes a day if possible. Walking is the best form of exercise. Weightlifting is important as we get older for our bone health. And if you are doing exercise, do your best to get outside, especially 2 hours within the 2-hour framework of when you woke up. Because what that does is set your circadian clock so that you can get a great night's sleep that evening. Community and connection, we're going to talk more deeply about this. There was a report that was released by the Surgeon General on May 3rd this year, stating that we have an epidemic of loneliness. So it's not just getting out there, but having high quality communications. So as we start to go into what's on the path of self-care, it's also kind of the path of happiness. That's another whole lecture. So know that the very first thing is the quality of our connections. technology, our relationship with it, having less, not easy to do. More nature all the time. We're happiest when we're outside. We'll talk about that. Attitude of gratitude, savoring, and laughter. So first, again, as I had mentioned, there it was a report that was actually released by Dr. Vivek Murthy, and basically being lonely is equivalent to smoking 2 packages of cigarettes a day. Isn't that amazing? The generations that are mostly affected by loneliness are the younger people, ages 15 to 24, who've had at least 70% less social interactions because of COVID. Also, older people. Now, I have a 94-year-old dad. I like to pull in some personal stories. So, my 94-year-old dad, his social life, he's really great at Facebook, and he has a lot to say, and he's really witty and creative. And sometimes I'll find him on there, and he'll be on there for hours. And I'm like, Dad, you got to put down the device. We're going to talk about how, but seniors really, struggle, especially for those that are not technologically savvy. They really have an issue. So being in check with your technology. Now, what's important, especially for those that are coming in from offices, it's called your high quality connections. These are short, didactic, positive interactions, typically with people that you work with. So if you've had a bad day, for example, or you're working through a project, having a way to connect with someone. What they do is it elevates your mood, it decreases your stress, your anxiety, it boosts your performance and persistence, and it makes learning much easier. So making sure that you have an opportunity to connect with others in your office. So some of you might work all hybrid or all at home or hybrid. Connect with others. It's very important. So knowing that those that have HQCs or high quality connections, they recover faster from stressful events. And career transitions is another one. So knowing that there's a sense of psychological safety in the workspace when you have these connections. Equally important with communication is active listening. So how we communicate with each other and effective communication. So when we can talk to someone and be there, but can you really be there? And what that means is your body is facing them, you're connecting, eye contact is important, but don't stay there too long because then the person can't kind of look off in space and get creative and come back to you. Paraphrasing, so using the words, I think you're saying this, I hear what you're saying, I understand you. Asking questions, be inquisitive, open-ended, encouraging conversations, or getting someone to really elaborate on their thoughts and ideas. Using empathy. If someone's telling you some difficult information, be there for them. Absolutely be there with sensitivity of their feelings. Avoiding judgment, and your goal is to listen, not give advice. Some people just want to be heard, and maybe you're the only person that particular day that you're giving them the floor. So active listening is great because it really helps prevent miscommunications and helps the other person feel understood. Dogs are great at this. If you have a dog, go home and look at use this. I love how my dogs look at me like, what's the next command? What are we doing next? And it really makes a difference. So this is some great work. So as I mentioned, technology, that can really get in the way of our self-care and making time for ourselves. So Anne Lamott says, almost everything will work again if you unplug it for a few minutes. And this includes us. If you think about our brains like they're a hard drive, we need to do a reboot or a soft boot every once in a while. Technology, it steals our joy, believe it or not, and which takes our self-care, which doesn't give us an antidote for all the stress around us. So she had this wonderful, there's a wonderful book by Catherine Price that was published called How to Break Up with Your Phone. So you ask yourself these 3 W's: why now, what for, and what else? So thinking about why now? Are you expecting something critical? Are you expecting something? Is that a reason to look down at the phone? Well, that's an important one, or a device. The next one, what for? Kind of related to why now? Like maybe you are with a group of people that, you feel uncomfortable, you're bored, you're shy, whatever it is, that device. You see a lot of that in the airport, and people are like, I don't really know anybody, I have extra time, I'm going to just dig into my device. This one, I think, is the most important point. What else? Now, Apple does a great job providing you information on your own relationship with technology. So a lovely report appears on my phone every Sunday and tells me how many hours I have been on. Sometimes it's 4 to 6 hours of just drifting. Okay, that is a waste of time for me. Think about, what could I have done with those 4 to 6 hours? Well, a lot more. I could have made time for my self-care, but instead I was sitting there sedentary, mindless, thinking it's providing me a stress reducer, but it's actually adding stress, because every time your device goes off, it's great because yes, you get this shot of dopamine, which is a feel-good chemical, but you also get a hit to your amygdala that's telling you, there's something I need to be worried about. So really, if you can have a better relationship with that phone, moving it somewhere, getting it out of sight, out of mind, really limiting your time that you're checking in with the news, it is a great idea. Nature does nurture. Now, I love to work with staff and bringing them outside. That's one of my joys, and working with retreats. So I do a lot of work. I do it here. I do it out in Sedona, Arizona. I bring groups out, and we get on the trails and we work with nature and we work with light. And, people are so much happier when they get outside, and you can do this any day. You can make your own personal retreat. So you get vitamin D when you go outside, which is really great for your immune system and your mood. It's invigorating, it's stimulating, it improves the mood, and it really helps us have a defense against diseases. But, research-based evidence demonstrates what we already know. Nature makes us happy. And the studies have shown that even our brain changes by getting outside. More specifically, that thinking part of the brain, your frontal lobe, which is hyper engaged in modern life, it actually gets a little bit more deactivated, so you can rest a little bit. So it's great, to get outside, and so many reasons. And the alpha waves that indicate a calm and alert state, they actually grow stronger. So much of evidence points that our behavior changes. We have less anxiety, less brooding on things. You might have noticed this, that you start to repeat yourself, knowing that as human beings, we repeat 90% of the same thought over and over again. It increases our capacity, our attention, our creativity, and our ability to connect in with other people. So even 5 minutes outside was linked to a significant mood boost. And also 20 to 30 minutes, a reduction of cortisol. So get yourself outside for your self-care and to manage your stress. Next thing, gratitude. And we've heard of gratitude before. I'm sure many of you too. Gratitude helps you, really connect in with being joyful, but also your health, how good it is for your health. And there are 3 parts of gratitude, but the very last one is the one that really was the kicker in terms of learnings. Gratitude is connected to appreciation, goodwill, and expression. And if you look at the chart on the right side, you can see that there are social benefits to gratitude, physical benefits, and psychological benefits. And there's areas that it all connects in terms of our well-being. We sleep better, we're more empathetic, we work better, we're more involved with our team members. There's so much good here. But let's go back. So say, for example, somebody gave you tickets to your favorite concert. Well, you're going to be really appreciative, right? You're going to say thank you. And you'll take the tickets and you're going to feel really good about that concert. You're going to feel really wonderful about it. But here's the kicker. It's the expression of the action. So if somebody gave you tickets, well, follow up with an email, follow up with a message. That is really what makes you happy and thrive from gratefulness. So know that it boosts our overall immune system when we are grateful, but really following up and making sure you kick into that 3rd step of gratitude can make all the difference for your body. Now, this one I'm going to ask for your insight. Savoring. And what I'd love you to do, and I'm sure some of you have your phones with you, Just simply open up your phone for a moment and look at your home screen. Now, I'm not asking quite yet, but I just want to have you ready. Now, savoring, what that means is to step outside and experience something and really hold on to it. So we appreciate it, knowing that often we fall out of the moment of really enjoying something that we're experiencing. So savoring intensifies and lengthens the positive emotions that come with doing something that you love. So savoring. What it also does is thwart hedonic adaptation. So when something really good happens, we get a rise in happiness, and then after a while, it goes away. So savoring really promotes it, lengthens it, and it really can keep us in the moment and prevents our minds from wandering. So on your home screen, what is on your home screen? Can you share with the group, all 270 of you, what is on your home screen? What is on your home screen? Stocks, my children, my pup, my children, my elderly dog in the ocean, God, my cat, children, heart, dogs, beach scene, grandchildren, baby snow leopard. Oh my gosh, grandchildren again, more grandchildren, forest, the Milky Way. There's a lot here. These are all things that are meaningful to you. So you have taken a picture basically in your mind. This is a nice one. My mom and I toasting each other. She passed in 2019. So holding on, to something that's meaningful is so good for your self-care. So if you don't have a picture and you only have the stock market up there, yes, it can bring us joy, but that can bring us tears too. So something that you can hold on to really make you grateful. So here's a quick chart that can really give you the surge of the chemicals that come along with happiness every day. There's 4 of them. There's dopamine, which motivates us and lets us really achieve some incremental goals. It's reward-based behavior. So things that relate to that are meditation, new experience, and exercises. Oxytocin's the love chemical. Trust, intimacy, the feeling that someone will protect you. How do we get that one? Not dark chocolate, I'm sorry. Acts of kindness. So getting the person behind you in the Starbucks line a cup of coffee when you don't even know them. That's a random act of kindness, or holding a door. Socializing, and then hugs. Now, here's something. The hug doesn't even need to come from someone. The hug can come from yourself. So just the act of putting your fingertips on your shoulders, and you can do this with me for the rest of the presentation and see how you feel. What this does is produce a surge of oxytocin. And that is so necessary for relaxation, that relaxation response that comes. So it doesn't need to be anybody there. It could just be you. The next thing, serotonin, and that elevates the good mood. And nature walks can do this for us. Gratitude can do this, and sunshine. And then last, endorphins. And what an endorphin does is diminishes the perception of pain. It keeps us going during workouts. So all of a sudden we might notice, in running, we get the runner's high. And what it does is help us work with enduring difficulties. Ways to get this: dark chocolate, and I'll tell you about that one. Laughter and exercise. I'm going to talk about the dark chocolate later on. So make sure you have some just, in your house this time of year. It's easier to get. Okay. Now, smiles and laughter really are self-care. It's the best medicine. Knowing that a good laugh has shown many short-term effects, and children smile 400 times a day, they laugh 150 times a day, and as adults, we smile 15 times a day, but hopefully in this webinar you smiled 100, and then adults laugh about 6 times a day. And that is so sad. We don't even know what happened. We've lost the ability to find those things that are so good for us. It soothes tension. It's really good for reducing the physical signs of stress. It relieves pain. It improves your immune system. So finding things to make you laugh, even going online, funny videos, watching your dog, whatever it is that makes you laugh, find it. It is good for your health. This is something important, and I love this. So it looks like a kindergartner drew this, and so it might make you laugh. But I assure you not. This is work by Dr. Rick Hansen. He is a psychologist. I think it's UCal Berkeley. And he's done a lot of work. He's a psychologist that connected into the mind-body connection. And he does a lot of work with stress. Stress, what happens, our body changes. In particular, our faces change. We might find it hard to smile. We might notice an enlargement, of the area around our nose if we're stressed. Isn't that amazing? Changes in the eyes, etc. So keeping an eye on your face is the very first thing that we need to understand. Are we under stress? Because cortisol pumps through our body, causes swelling and changes in our body. So knowing, are we in the green zone, that we are relaxed, that we can smile and feel safe? Or are we in the red zone, that we are angry and we are not making any sense? Well, moving on from that one, the exhaustion funnel. So this is something for us all to keep check with. Throughout our days, we have certain ways that we kind of earmark, 4 different quadrants of the day. We work, we have our chores, we rest, and we play. In the ideal world, we do all those things. So you can think about that as as Monday morning, if you've had a good weekend and you've meal prepped and you've exercised and you're in good shape. So what happens is, the more that we do, things drop out of the equation. The very first thing to drop out of our lives that is so essential into helping our nervous system re-regulate is play. Now, we tell our children, go out and play, get some fresh air, but we fail to do that. And play is not always that. Play could mean a flow-based activity, something that time passes and that, you're just so in love with whatever it is. It could be gardening, skiing, whatever it is that you are just in the moment. It could be connecting with others. Maybe you have a social group or a spiritual group that you're involved with, or it could be exercise or something else. Hobby. Play is important, the first thing to go. Then what happens? We have our work, we have our chores, we have our rest. Well, we get busy. First thing that gets compromised, with stress is our self-care, which is our rest. We start to lose that 7 to 8 hours because our nervous system is so agitated that we are producing epinephrine and cortisol. It's keeping us up. Or we're cutting it short because we're working longer. Next thing, we're left to work and chores. Then the chores kind of slide and you might find yourself, eating quickly, grabbing that processed food and sugar because you need energy to get through your work. So that is really the trajectory of the exhaustion funnel, that it doesn't end well if we don't take care of ourselves. So just being aware, question for self, do I get to play? And how often does play on Monday look different from play on Thursday? Most likely, things do shift at the busier we get. Now let's talk about the wheel. So as I mentioned, I'm also an integrative health and well-being coach from Duke, and this is the Duke Wheel of Health. Kind of like the Harvard one, it has many different components. And this wheel is so important for our self-care. And what I'd like you to do, I'm just going to talk about the what's in this wheel. So basically, the very center of the wheel is mindfulness, awareness. And until we are aware, it's hard for us to even make sense of the wheel. We just go through our days and they kind of like Groundhog Day, they just roll one into the other. But self-care is, again, the antidote for stress. It comes in many different forms. The very first one, movement, exercise, and equally rest. You don't always need to move. You may not always need, deep rest, but what do you need in that particular area? Then nutrition, how are you eating? Making sure, again, stay whole food, try to really avoid the carbs, processed food, and sugars. Personal and professional development, those are important. You need to have a trajectory. Learning, your brain needs to learn. Keeping the superhighways of the brain working really well. Keeping yourself learning new hobbies, education, always continuing the journey there. Your physical environment, well, you can't really be taking care of yourself if you have newspapers from, 5 years ago lined up in your room, making sure that your workspace is clean and organized, where your things are. That really makes a difference in how you perform in your self-care. Relationships and community. So making sure you're reaching out to those around you, staying in touch with family, friends, work coworkers, that also spiritual groups, whatever that means to you, being connected to something bigger, a group of people, family connections. Again, spirituality. Maybe that means just going out in nature or something else. But all of these components are important to hold you up, to hold up that stool, to keep that wheel moving forward. And then at the very outside of this wheel is prevention and intervention. So are you making your appointments for your physicals, your colonoscopy, mammogram, those very important things that keep us healthy moving forward? The questions for you right now: what areas of the wheel am I doing well at? And you don't need to share this. What am I doing well at? And equally important, what areas can I improve on? What can I improve on? So I had a presentation the other day, and it was in my cousin's hometown. And I made sure that I arranged for a dinner the same night that, I had a chance to connect with family. It's so important that we find time, even though we're so busy. Well, if we got rid of some of our phone time, maybe we'll find that extra time to really hone in on what's important to us in our self-care. And think about, of this wheel, what are one or two ways, this is a question to all of us in the chat, what are one or two ways that you can balance your self-care wheel? What are one or two ways that you can balance this wheel? What are one or two things you can bring in? And maybe a few you can share. Improve movement, exercise, and nutrition. Better nutrition. Aside more time for myself. Prevention and intervention. Schedule time for mindfulness. Daily walks, decrease phone, create boundaries, sleep more, break down big tasks into smaller, manageable chunks, secure boundaries, receive rather than give, stop saying yes. Thank you, thank you, thank you, everyone. Walk the dogs. Thank you. So be aware, your self-care is not just one thing. It's many, many things. They all work together to keep you in balance and keep that wheel moving and your stool strong. Now, you have a few things you want to create, knowing that, habits, a little bit about the science of habits. So this is where the chocolate comes back. Okay. So I was a marathon runner. I've done several marathons in my life. And I have to tell you, those first few runs, they killed me. And I was reading a book, Charles Duhigg, The Power of Habits. And there was, they talked about runners. And as someone trains for a marathon, there's a really good insight here. So when you first start running, it's awful, and your body's not producing those feel-good chemicals, those endorphins, because you're trying to survive. So what they did is they gave the runners, before they started to get that elevation, that runner's high, those endorphins, they gave them a piece of chocolate, so they got the endorphins artificially, but yet there was some correlation with the running. Know that, I thought that was really interesting. Every habit that you have, 40% of your day is habits, and this is a whole nother webinar again, but habits are basically things that we do automatically. Like imagine you had to think about every time you brushed your teeth, toothpaste, toothbrush, water, the same thing through every time. Well, what the brain does is it moves those thought processes from the prefrontal cortex into another part of the brain called the basal ganglia, where it turns on and it becomes a habit. Every habit has a cue. So it's when it happens, time of the day, or who you're with, or what's happening around you. The routine is the habit, and there's a reward. So if you think about it, when you brush your teeth, you usually do it in the morning and at night. The routine is brushing your teeth. The reward is sparkly teeth, and you don't have to go to the dentist for cavities because you've taken care of yourself. It's a habit. The average habit takes 66 days to create. So being patient with yourself. So keep on doing it. Repetition, reinforcement. Tell somebody you're trying to create a self-care habit. Maybe do it in your department. Work as a group. So be patient. Cue, routine, reward. I'm going to share that book at the end. So know that overall, stress isn't inherently bad. It's what you think matters, kind of going back to the very beginning. So the best way to manage stress isn't to reduce or avoid it, but rethink it and embrace it. So there were some studies that were done at the University of Wisconsin. I'm just going to share this, excuse me. This study was done by Dr. Kelly McGonigal. And basically, it was a seminal study that was looking at 28,000 people, their perceived level of stress in their lives. They were asked two questions. First question, during the past 12 months, would you say that you've experienced one, a lot of stress, two, moderate amount of stress, three, relatively little stress, and four, almost no stress at all? The second question is, how much has this effect of stress had on your health? One, a lot. Two, some. Three, hardly any. And four, none. The researchers then looked at the death rates. I don't know how far, actually 9 years. They went out 9 years, and the results were absolutely startling. The study found that having a lot of stress in your life wasn't linked to premature death. However, but by having a lot of stress in your life and believing that it was taking a toll on your health, increased the risk of premature death by 43%. So know that that's a thing. So how you have a relationship with stress is everything. So making sure, finally, we're getting to the end, make peace with perfect. You can't be perfect, so set some small, manageable goals, just like health coaching, small, manageable, action-related tasks so that you make a difference, that you can take control. Let go of all or nothing thinking. And then real quick, how do we alleviate stress? Some solutions here. And one of them is on LinkedIn. You can look me up, Trish Hart. It's called the Polyvagal Reset. So it's a little bit more extensive. It's great. And so go check that one out. But first, check in with yourself. Am I hungry? It's called HALT. Hungry, angry, lonely, tired. So when you notice your stress response elevating, check in with those things. Second thing, am I addressing my basic needs? And what I mean by that, have I eaten today? Have I used the bathroom? Have I had any water? Did I have a good sleep last night? Things like that. Checking in, am I breathing? Because as I mentioned, your vagus nerve ending is way down here. So if you're breathing up here or shallow breathing, what that's doing is creating a stress response and putting you in the sympathetic mode. So check in with your breathing. Sometimes when we're stressed, our mind is over here, our body is over here. We disassociate. So check in, where are my feet? This is what we did at the beginning of this webinar. We took a sigh, we connected in, we got rid of carbon dioxide, we got rid of nitric oxide, stress and tension, we brought in oxygen. So good. The escape hatch, making sure when you are breathing deeply. You're connecting with your inhalations below your navel space, and you're exhaling, you're drawing your navel to your back body. A quick tool, this is the escape hatch. Dr. Benson originated this. Take your elbows down to your thighs and let your head hang heavy. And when you take a breath, you're going to notice that that breath is going to go so deep into your belly that it's connecting into the end of your vagus nerve. So when you are breathing, fold forward. Tensing and releasing is another solution, going into the areas of your body that are really holding tension. So if you notice, for example, your shoulders tense, well, squeeze your fist and hold it here for 10 seconds and then release. You might notice that shoulder starts to feel better, starts to create some more space. Any part of your body, the whole body can do this. And then back to that polyvagal reset sequence, which is somatic based, and that's on LinkedIn. So as we start to conclude this webinar, into some wonderful, valuable resources. Lots of books. KGA gives books. I know you get 2 a year, and I think the Habit one is there, but I know that you can call Megan or reach out to Megan. She'll tell you what's there. But these are some wonderful books on stress and self-care. There's also some apps. Insight Timer is a free app that is wonderful and has hundreds and thousands of meditations and antidotes for stress to help you find your relaxation response. Calm is another one. Website, Psychology Today, Harvard Business Review, Huberman Lab, and Dr. Mark Hyman are experts in integrative medical care. So enjoy. These are great resources. As I mentioned, this is recorded, so you can come back here and take a screen grab of these. But now we have a few minutes left, so I'm going to send you over to Megan, who's going to tell you a little bit about your wonderful EAP, KGA, which can do so much for you. So I'm going to present the slide. Here we are. Hi,
All
Megan.
right. Hi. Thank you so much, Trish. That was, as always, a fantastic presentation. And
So
thank you so much,
great.
everyone, for joining today's webinar. I'd like to wrap up by just sharing with you really quickly about the services available to you through KGA. We are a free benefit provided to you through your employer. We're completely confidential and available 24/7 to offer you support with your mental health, work life, and personal life concerns. We provide assistance with finding counseling as well as offering resources for financial, legal, childcare, and more.